If I had to rank the books of the Bible from my most favorite to my least favorite, Job would be the least favorite book. I would take Leviticus, the book that's like a little bit dry and lists out all the laws. I would take reading that over reading the book of Job. The book of Job is about this guy who's righteous and he's doing everything right, and God is actually quite happy with this person. Um, and despite that, he loses everything. He goes through incredibly deep loss, including losing his family, losing his business, losing his reputation, losing his friends and the support from his friends. Everything gets wiped out. And then even loses his health, which, if you're the type of person who likes to be doing things and hates feeling helpless, I think you can relate to how devastating it is when, on top of all these other losses, you also lose control of your own body. So I've never liked this book because I am a bit more of a type A person. I like to have goals. I like to try to do things with excellence. I like to try to do things well. And a big part of the motivation for me to like do things and work so hard is I have the mentality of, well, working hard and doing things well is going to bring a good outcome. So a book like this kind of throws in my face the reality of life where you can be making no mistakes and still have everything go wrong. So normally I avoid this book. Um, Actually, that's not true. Normally I read this book, but I don't sit too long with it. I just kind of, whoop, get through it. But this time around, when I was reading through the Bible, because routinely I'll read from cover to cover, um, and I got to the book of Job, this time was different for me because right when I hit the book of Job, I was kind of going through my own sort of Job season. Now, my level of loss was not at all at the same level as Job's, but it was painful in its own way. I went through a breakup, which for me, marriage is my biggest dream. Having a partner, having a family, that's like highest on the list of things that I desire and long for. And so for me, having a relationship or meeting someone where I'm hopeful that this is the one and this is it, and all those feelings bubble up and the excitement, even when you don't want it to because you've been disappointed before and you're like, I don't want to get too excited, but you are. That was me. I was very excited and very hopeful, and it didn't work out. So that was a huge kick to the gut. And then after that, 2 weeks later, so that happened, I had this breakup with this person that I had been really hopeful about. And then 2 weeks later, my landlord sat me down. I'd been living in this house for 3 years. If you know my story about moving to Windsor and all the crazy stuff, this house was like a big part of God confirming for me that I'm meant to be in Windsor. And, there's little details about the house that really spoke to me and spoke to my heart. And so whenever I've been having a hard time here in Windsor, getting my footing and figuring out what I'm supposed to be doing, I always come back in my mind to that house as like an encouragement that I'm meant to be here. And it was my safe space. It was, it was my home for 3 years. And anyway, the landlord had decided, they were at a place where they needed to repossess the house. And so I was given a deadline to move out 2 months from that date when they sat me down. So lost the guy, lost my house, and didn't know where I was going to go next. And then, so I had also, since I moved to Windsor, been running a life group. It's like a Bible study group where you get together. This is my community of people that, I studied the Bible with, prayed with. We met weekly. And it was just a big encouragement to me, that group. And over the last year, but definitely over the last 6 months, the group has been dwindling in membership just from people who'd been in the group for a long time having a life change. One had a baby, one was getting married and moving to another country, and just all this stuff, good stuff, wonderful stuff to celebrate was happening. But it was pulling people out of the group one by one. And then eventually, it was down to just three of us, and the last person let me know that they were also going to leave the group. So the group ended. So then, lost a relationship, lost my house, my home, and then also lost the thing that got me excited every week that I love to like pour myself into, and that was taken away. Um, and then, as if those three things were enough, and this was happening over weeks, it was like one week, one thing, the next week, the next thing, the next week, the next thing. And then, last but not least, I'm opening up the book of Job and I'm starting to read, and my health goes out. I am the type of person who doesn't often get sick. I usually get sick like once per year for like a week, but I started with like just a cough and a sore throat, and I was like, fine, I'll get over it, tried to work through it, but it just got progressively worse. I lost hearing in this ear, and it was just a little bit of ringing for a while, and my face started to swell up, my eyes was swelled shut. I had to go to the walk-in clinic and get like some antibiotics and stuff, and it was just a whole mess, and I was sick for probably a good 3 weeks. Anyway, so that was my life. It was just like a downhill slide, and I was hitting the book of Job, and I was, for the first time, I guess, kind of like, maybe this book has something for me. Maybe this is going to be something helpful. So that actually made me interested in reading it, because it kind of felt like, I know this is going to sound dramatic, but it felt like I was Job. But anyway, I'm not just here to tell you how bad and hard my life is. I'm here because I want us to be able to go into this book together and find encouragement from God about what do we have to hold on to? What do we have to hope for when we're in seasons of deep loss? Things are happening out of our control, and we feel like we've lost the ground. This is kind of ironic because I just said I want to encourage you guys. This is not going to probably sound encouraging, but I think it's important. The first thing that I noticed when I was reading the book of Job is in chapter 3, after Job has lost everything, he goes into one of his first speeches where he talks about his loss. And this verse just like stood out to me. But so he's kind of talking about basically just God, why was I born? Like I should have never been born. Wishing that, not just to die, but wishing that his life hadn't even happened. That's how depressed he was in this situation. And then it says in chapter 3, verse 24, he says, I cannot eat for sighing. My groans pour out like water. What I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded has come true. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, only trouble comes. And I thought it was interesting when he said this was something I feared, this was something I dreaded. Because Job had an idyllic life, everything was going well. And I kind of wonder, well, I know God sees us, he sees all of us, all of our hearts. I wonder what God thought about that part of Job. God could see this fear he was carrying of, I have all these things, but what if I lose it? Like, dread is a strong word. That to me says that what happened to Job in this story was not something that he thought was impossible or didn't see coming. It sounds like this was something in his heart he was scared of and he thought about. And who knows if he like woke up in the middle of the night thinking about these things. Who knows what that looked like, but there was a dread within him about the idea of loss that he had never experienced. And when I read this story, I try to think of why. Why did God allow this to happen to Job? And I don't feel like I have a great satisfying answer for you guys, But looking at this fear to me felt like I just wonder if there was something in Job that wasn't at peace, even though he had everything. And I wonder if God wanted to remove that fear. I wonder if God wanted to remove that dread. Um, that's kind of my first point on this book. Again, maybe not the encouragement you want to hear, but God doesn't hide us from the things that we're afraid of. No matter how good you are or how bad you are, God doesn't hide you from your fears. He doesn't block you from experiencing the things that you're afraid to are of happening. Um, and that's a bit uncomfortable because sometimes we think of like in a worldly mindset, like of serving God so that you can kind of get what you want or get the idyllic life. And that's not really how it always goes down with God. Things happen to you that you didn't deserve or you didn't ask for. And why? You know, this is a big question a lot of us have. Why? Why do horrible things happen in life? Why? Why, when God could stand in the way, doesn't He? And I think it has to do with the dread and the fear. I think everything Job was going through, it was a test of faith. It was to see, is Job able to hold on to who he knows God is, even when everything around him is changing like this? Because that's the thing that the devil kind of accuses Job of when he goes before God, and God's like, hey, have you seen Job? And he's like, almost like the proud dad showing off his kid, like how great Job is. So this is clearly not God punishing Job, but the enemy is kind of saying like, oh, it's just because he has all these things. He's been so blessed that he likes God. Who doesn't like somebody, that gives them stuff? And so God is, I believe, not necessarily teaching Job a lesson, but I think he's teaching the devil a lesson to be like, no, this man had a heart for God. And God was so sure that no matter what happened, Job would not turn away and not lose his faith, that he allowed it. And I don't think this was to shame or punish Job, because at the end of the book, God seems to me, to address both Job and his friends as though they've spoken wrongly about him and his character. And Job and his friends had different philosophies about what was going on with Job, but the thing that they agreed on was they both felt that Job was being punished by God. Job's friends in his speeches are very sure that Job committed some kind of sin to deserve everything that was happening. Job was very adamant in his speeches, which got them even more mad and caused a lot of back and forth, that he had done nothing wrong to deserve it. And that even if he had, it wasn't worse than, their lives. So he was basically saying God doesn't have a right to allow these things to happen to me. But both of them were saying that God was punishing Job. And I don't think that's what was happening. And I don't know if I fully understand it. But I think essentially God was showing the devil up and being like, this man is stronger than you are. Because who the devil is someone who rebelled against God, who broke his connection with God, who walked away from God. And so the devil's constantly trying to pull other people to do the same thing and accuse them of not honoring God the way he has not honored God. And so I feel like this is more about God showing something to the devil than it is about God showing something to Job. But the conclusion of the book doesn't give a clear answer on that, so read it and tell me what you think. And if you don't believe me about the whole showing up the devil and God not hiding us from our fears thing, something else that came to my mind when I was preparing for this is in the New Testament. Actually, I don't even think I have to turn there because I know the verse. It's in Matthew chapter 10, and Jesus is sending out his disciples to go and preach the good news of the gospel. And he says that he's sending them out as sheep among wolves. And that's what our God is like. He's a God that takes innocent people and he sends you out among the wolves. He doesn't hide you from the wolves. He doesn't, as soon as we become Christians, be like, oh, good, and like gather us up to heaven right away so that we're like protected from absolutely everything. We don't have to go through any more pain or any more suffering. That's not the God that we serve. And it's not the life that he offers us. He does give us life. He does give us strength for what we will go through, but he doesn't stop us from going through it. And the whole point of that is so that we can be a picture of who God is, and we can be a picture of God's love and God's care and God's power as well to overcome the darkness and overcome the things that the enemy does. And so in this story, a lot of horrible things happen to Job, and they are allowed. But at the end of the story, God comes in and he restores everything that Job had. At the end of the day, his entire life is rebuilt. And I believe even it says that it was rebuilt even more than what he had before. Let me just find the verse. So in chapter 42, very end of the book, if you jump down to verse 12, it says, "So the Lord blessed Job in the second half of his life, even more than in the beginning." Even more than in the beginning. So part one of his life, everything that he lost, the Lord ends up blessing him with even more than what he had, which is already good, already amazing, already he was like at the top of his game with, in terms of richness, in terms of being blessed, in terms of, all the things. And God blessed him even more in the second half of his life. And I think this is a huge encouragement to us. And I think this is also meant to be prophetic in this book towards Christians, that in this life, we go through losses, deep, horrible losses, and they hurt. And nobody wants that. But you have to understand that God sees every single loss, every single point of damage, every single hurt that you go through. There's a verse in the Psalms that says that God, it talks about him like keeping our tears in jars. He sees every emotion that you feel, even the ones that you don't express out loud. He sees them, and he's kept track of it all. He knows what's happened to you in your life. And God is a good God and a generous giver. And this is something we can see from this book. God loves to bless people. That's who he is. When Job and his friends, when God calls them out to say, basically, you weren't speaking rightly about me, they were speaking about God as a punisher that just wants to basically make them suffer. That's how they were talking about God. That's what was wrong. God is not that. God is a blesser. Is that a word? God likes to bless. God wants to see people thrive. God wants to fill people with life. And so that's what you see in the second half of the book. But the awkward part is the middle, and all of us have to live the middle. But I want you to know, whether it's in this life or in the next life, God has kept track of everything. All the things that you think nobody sees, or all the things that you feel like nobody understood. That person didn't understand how much they hurt you. They didn't, but God did. And he has that perspective, and he's been keeping track. And God is a God who wants to repay evil with good. And so at the end of the day, the confidence we can take from the book of Job is in this life, no matter what is stripped from us, no matter what is taken, no matter what we lose, no matter what losses we go through, God is going to repay. He's going to repay evil for good, and he's going to do it in the best way, more than you can imagine. I know I sound emotional when I'm talking about this, because it is hard when you're in the loss part to picture what that's going to look like, what that's going to feel like you can't, you're kind of, you know what I mean? You're in the middle of something painful, and it's hard to see the other side of the door. And I don't want to minimize that, because I don't know, if you're watching, you're going through something like what I've been through, or something different that I've never been through and can't even imagine. I want you to know that you're not alone in that. And it's not just that there's people like me going through it too. It's that God sees you and he's not lost track of you. And he's not lost track of what's happened to you. And he does have a plan for how to turn it for good. Everything he can turn for good. There is nothing dead that God can't give life to. Emotions, eh? Anyway, this is something I say to myself. I'm a bit of like an overachiever. I like to do things well. I like to do things with excellence. I like to do things right. And the motivation for me is so that things go well. If I just hit the mark, then it goes well. So when things in my life go wrong, and when I was going through this season, everything that I started to lose, I immediately, my gut reaction was to be like, what did I do wrong? And to start to question myself. What did I do wrong? How did I screw up? How did I mess this up? And honestly, I'm amazed, like listening to Job's story, that when his friends are telling him you did something wrong, he doesn't agree with them. That to me is the most mind-blowing thing about this book, is how did Job have the confidence to know that he didn't do something that upset God to make him do this? How did he know that? Because I don't feel like I ever feel that way. I feel like whenever something goes wrong, I'm like, what did I do? And there's like this internal attack that starts, and my sense of value and worth that I feel within myself immediately drops. And my feelings about what I think God thinks of me immediately drops, and it plummets, and I lose that depth of connection that I have when I feel confident that God is pleased with me. And the comfort in this book is that it is not a safe assumption when you experience loss and pain in your life that you did something wrong. That is not a safe assumption at all. That is not always the case. Now, of course, there's things we can do in our life wrong that can cause problems, okay? You lie to somebody, they find out about your lie, it causes a break in trust in the relationship, okay? That's clear cause and effect. Yes, we can do things that bring bad things into our life or loss into our life. And those are definitely things we need to pay attention to and repent of. But what I'm saying is, when something in your life goes wrong, you can't automatically assume that that is what it is. I think you need to take it to God, and you need to take it to the Holy Spirit, and you need to pray about it. And before you start digging to see, what did I do wrong? Or asking that question, you should ask God, what do you think of me right now? Because that's a different question. Asking, what did I do wrong, automatically puts yourself in the position of being accused, of I messed up, and of kind of taking down your self-worth. But if instead you ask God, like, God, how do you see me right now? Instead of opening yourself up for like punishment and accusation, which is not the heart of the Father, and it opens you up to another side of the spiritual realm. When you say, God, what do you think of me right now? You're opening yourself up to receive love. Because God, even if he has something to call you out on, he has a way of doing it that is very gentle and very kind. And that's not how we generally are with ourselves or how the enemy speaks to us. So you have to be really careful, because even if you did make a mistake, the thing that's going to give you the strength to do something different the next time is understanding the heart of love. It's not going to be understanding punishment. It's not going to help you grow. Punishment can help correct you, but it doesn't help growth. Growth comes from love and comes from being supported and being, encouraged. Which, by the way, when I say punishment, I believe punishment and discipline are two different things. That's a topic for another day, but I think that's an important thing to remember, is that being loved doesn't mean that there is never any challenge given to you. But I think a punishment okay, we are going to talk about it. Punishment is something that stops you and halts you and brings you down and makes you feel like you can't go forward. That's what a punishment is. It's meant to kind of arrest you and hold you, right? That's a punishment. Whereas discipline is you messed up, here's a chance to do better. Discipline is it doesn't necessarily come without any consequences, but the consequences are designed to help grow you, not to hold you back, to help you become better at this thing you failed at, not to, be like, you can't handle this, get out of here. So, very different things. And I really believe that God works so strongly through discipline and giving second chances, but to be disciplined, there has to be a level of trust between you and God. And there's another verse in the Bible that talks about not being a mule that needs to be controlled with a bit, like an animal. If you're trying to control it where to go and it doesn't want to go, you have to get harsh with it on the reins because there's no other way it's going to listen. So that can happen if you're very, very stubborn. But when you have like a soft heart and you're able to lay down your pride and you're able to actually accept help from God, that's where this relationship of discipline can come in, where yes, you do wrong, but each time you do wrong, you will find God is opening up doors to help you move forward and help you try again and help you do better. Because he's a good father, and he doesn't want to see you stunted. He doesn't want to see you brought low. He doesn't want to see you destroyed. He doesn't want to see your life ended. He doesn't want to see you go through all that loss. That's not his heart for you. Again, his heart is to bless you. So God's always looking for ways to do that. And when we have trust with him and we have good relationship with him, he can come in and do that. There's probably a lot more I could say about the book of Job, but I feel like this video has been long enough, so we will end it there. I really encourage you, please read the book for yourself. Please read the Bible for yourself. There is so much in every verse, every page that you can learn from and that can help grow you, and it will transform your life. So as you're finishing this video, if you are the type of person who you learned well through like contemplation, I want to give you a couple questions to ask yourself, so you can write these down. One question I want you to ask yourself is, when was the last time you experienced a personal loss? Was it a relationship, a friendship? Was it a job? Was it a house? Was it maybe even a clothing item or something you owned that you really loved that broke or went missing? What was it? Something that was a deep personal loss for yourself. I want you to write that down. Okay, so I want you to have that situation. And then I want you to not ask, was this my fault? I want you to ask, God, how do you see me in light of this situation? God, how do you see me? How are you looking at me? What do you see? Okay, so situation of loss. God, how do you see me? And then the last question I want you to sit with and ask is, I want you to ask God, give me hope for how you're going to rebuild. Give me hope for how you're going to rebuild. Because God is not daunted by loss. That dread and fear that Job carried towards loss, God does not have that. Look at the world. Look at how much loss happens on a daily basis that God allows. God is not afraid of loss. He's not afraid of it because he's more powerful than it. And he can bring everything back that we've lost. There's actually no loss in God's book. There's this small period of time that we are on the earth, and it's such a small, tiny portion of our whole life. And God's not too fussed about the mess that happens in this tiny little frame, or even the loss, because he knows how much more there is to life, and he knows how much more he has saved up to give to you. So he's not afraid. And the more time we let God talk to us about his heart for us and how he sees us and sees our situations, the more we can draw that power and that boldness that God feels into our own lives. And I would bet you, the Bible doesn't say it, so it's not clear, but I would bet you that after this experience that Job went through, as horrible as it was, I bet that he walked out of this with a new level of faith and confidence in his Lord and in his God. So that's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Be blessed, and I'll be praying for you.